Past few months there's been an awful lot going on in regards to not only the small ships but also the capital ships, shall we say, the big guns of the fleet for the UEE. That's the Idris, the Bengal and the Javelin. You've seen the Javelin in a disarray of state in the Homestead demo. The Idris has consistently been in development for a very long time now. There's been an awful lot going into it. There's so many kind of factors that you need to account for: design, art, aesthetic, cinematics. Does it play well? Does it feel good? There's all these kind of things going on. The Idris was always the first of that fleet to kind of go through that motion. So that's pretty much there now. We've got one room, I think, that's left to do, which is the missile room. But that's going to be a fun, good task. Leave the best till the end, as they say. The history of the Idris, it really kind of started off as a much smaller ship. And as we kind of do very well in the UK, we make things bigger and bigger and bigger. During the development of Squadron, we kind of realised that really the ship wasn't going to be big enough to suit the needs of the story. There was so many more kind of spaces that we needed to get in there. The hangar needed to feel bigger and better, and you know, there was a lot more kind of requirements being driven from shall we say, the script. So we've done our best to kind of stay true to Ryan Church's original kind of pitch for that stuff. Obviously, when a ship gets kind of wider and wider and wider, it starts to look a bit tubbier and tubbier and tubbier. So we lengthened it as well to kind of bring the overall kind of, shall we say, the look of the ship back in tow. As mentioned, it's slightly more angular. It's slightly more angular to keep it efficient in the engine. And you know, as you can see, it's just exponentially grown. It's not going to grow anymore. The beautiful thing about the Idris is when you take the exterior shell away from the ship, it does genuinely look like an oil rig inside. It is so packed full of stuff. It's quite crazy. There's very little negative space. Every kind of square inch is used. So we've been as efficient as we can be. We've also kind of, you know, we try to make, I've always kind of approached it in a way of, it needs to feel like a really nice space to walk around, and it should flow. You should never kind of walk into walls when you go through a doorway. You should always kind of, your golden rule is the pretzel design, as I call it. When you walk into a room, you should see your exit or your entrance within 60 degrees. That's your field of view. So there's all these kind of little things that we try to take into account. So when you're playing, you know, the big games like, you know, Battlefront and Call of Duty, you study the level design, they do that very well. So it's something that I've always tried to push forward as well. And also to try and bring in some kind of verticality where possible. So you'll notice there's a lot more steps up and down. You know, there's all these, and it is an absolute nightmare to performance capture with this stuff, but it does genuinely feel a little bit more alive than just this kind of flat plane. The Javelin was always in a good place. I was never going to sweat it. It was always going to kind of take care of itself as long as we kept the primary focus on the Idris, which is your home, should we say, during the story of Squadron. So, and then we've got the Bengal, which is the, should we say, well, it's the first ship we saw. Massive challenge, massive undertaking. It's not as black and white as going in and going, okay, we're going to make this big ship. It just doesn't work that way. You take into account budgets, fuel distance ratios. Can we load stuff efficiently to therefore squeeze more out of the engine? The exterior, the style of it kind of lends itself to this already. It's very kind of polygonal in form. So we've got a lot of planar surfaces that are easy to work with for the engine, and they're always going to light well. So there's a lot of factors that we play to our strengths. When you study a fleet in not only Star Citizen, but if you go back through the history of very kind of successful sci-fi films, and I think the film that executed it the best of all ever was the opening to Star Wars. You know, you see the runner kind of go across, and it's got these soft forms, and it's generally kind of very softly lit. There are lots of cylinders, lots of, you know, fillets, shall we say. You kind of understood, without even seeing the Star Destroyer, what was going on and who was on board, right? And then you have this very aggressive, angular monolith kind of come over you, and you kind of understood instantly, no music cues, what their role in the universe was. And that's something that we try and achieve with the design and the execution of the UE fleet, right? These guys are your friends. They're not here to kind of, you know, be shall we say, like, aggressive. They are the human element of this story. So when you study the form of these ships, they're very much in tow with that very much educational first 30 seconds of Star Wars. So, you know, and then of course, you know, you can roll into like Vandal and stuff like that, which you will see further down the line, that is the bipolar opposite of that. So you should, you know, it works both ways. If you see a ship and it's like a 10 pixel silhouette on your screen, you should get who it is and if they're friendly or if they're foe. And you should also understand that if you're stood in a corridor and you've just spawned and you just look at a wall panel, you should understand exactly where you are, just through the basics. And that's what we've tried to do. So they're the kind of three big bad boys that are in production right now, and are moving on at quite a rate.
The Prowler's, it's been a really interesting piece to work on. For me as an art director, it's basically, you know, a new generation of style that we get to work on. You know, when I first joined the project, there was a lot of things already established. So the Asperia Prowler essentially is a reproduction of a Tavaran-based rapid deployment ship. Essentially, yeah, you start with a blank canvas. You talk to the writers and get the lore. Speak to the other art directors. You know, kind of, this is probably the first time we've really all probably sat down right before the get-go and just sort of said, okay, what are the things that we were focusing on for these guys? Josh had already done some character work, so we took a little bit from that, but you know, characters don't look like ships necessarily. You know, humans don't look like attack helicopters. And according to the law, the architecture is meant to be based on Henoism. So we've sort of been going for a very sort of slab-sided, you know, brutalist kind of feel. That's, you know, that was kind of the initial brief. Slight hint of, you know, Egyptian. As we discussed further, I mean, that was there at the start, and it's very slightly still there, but in total this has had 6 concept artists on it from start to finish, because we had a very tight deadline. There's always a high amount of pressure because you know, it's all exploratory basically, and you know, I've got to give Chris some things to work with basically. So you know, concept artists work in different ways, so I've kind of used that to my advantage. So initially we did a 2-week sprint, coming up with just 4 very sort of different looks, basically different configurations, different styles, you know, vertical or horizontal, or no cockpits, all sorts of things, and then just present it to Chris. Say, hey Chris, what do you like? And so he's like, well, like bit of A, bit of B, which is fine because I kind of liked all the designs anyway. So it doesn't matter what Chris picks as long as, you know, I can get behind it. That's, you know, that's cool. In my head, I imagine it, you know, you'd be using it in a traditional sense. You know, you'd be flying into hostile zones. You know, maybe you'll have 2 or 3 of them. They'll come in, land. You know, it's the full sort of Black Hawk Down treatment. Troops jump out, and then the pilot and co-pilot just whiz off to safety. The emotional feel of it, basically, you know, when you see this, you know, it should be just like, heck, you know, what's this flying in? It's been more dealing with shape language, the cut of the lines, you know. It's quite minimalist, so the lines are, you know, there for a reason generally. I've been calling it like a radar deflection kind of material, so it's kind of like a bird's nest. It kind of feeds into the whole avian feel of the ship. And then the interior, we've gone quite different to what we've been doing for the human ships. It's basically quite oppressive. It's like this dark red, and it's all dark red. I was sort of thinking at the time that, you know, basically when you see the troops come out, if they come out of this exit, because there's multiple exits, right? You know, it's coming out of the mouth of hell, basically. So it's just got this dark red, and then you've got this oppressive black hole kind of thing. And then as you make your way through to the cockpit, the red slowly fades off essentially, and it goes more towards blacks and greys with just a hint of red. Just so for pilots, there's less distraction. And we've kind of just sort of been featuring like a sort of 3-line sort of motif, which we took from the character design that Josh did, and that that is fed into the ship basically in lots of subtle ways. There's a heavy avian feel with the ship, some in subtle ways, some not so subtle. Fans will see straight away that it's got some large VTOLs basically, and in landed mode it's it's a real hunched, aggressive. It's a bird of prey, it's classic basically. And then it also has like a special ability, special feature, whatever you want to call it, of sort of these defensive blades that come out, but yet to still fully realise, the sort of theory behind it all, like in terms of lore. But certainly, it helps with flight, low manoeuvrability, but also when it comes into land, VTOLs go down, all the blades pop out, which people may call feathers, but I call them blades, and they provide like a defensive position. So when the troops come out, and they, that again, you've just got these huge doors that open up, and rather than just one large single sliding door, which often these ships have, we've got 4 individual essentially gates, and those have Tavar and shield tech in them. So it's kind of like the Idris in the hangar. You fly out and you go through the force field. This is like a personal version. That's kind of one of the visual hooks of the ship. So the ship could be flying along with all its armoured doors up, but it's still got its energy shields there, so the troops can, you'll be able to look out. This is what I hope, right? And you'll be there in your harness and you're just looking out and you're just seeing the landscape go by, or whatever it is. The other 2 visual features, avian features, we've got a split tail, so it's like a swallowtail, and then the head is obviously very sort of eagle-like. And this time we've been able to essentially remove the cockpit. There's a head to this thing, but it's essentially one-way glass, so you can't see in, but you can see out, the pilot can see out, so it gives us this really nice monolithic kind of armoured feel, and again lending to that whole sort of Tavar and warrior hardcore heroism. And so we've just been building on that. I think as players they'll really dig it, and I mean there's nothing like it in the Star Citizen universe at the moment.
sense that electricity in the air? Do you smell those ionized particles? Do you feel your bowels loosening with a deep thrum from hundreds of thrusters firing at once? That, my friends, can only mean one thing. Galactic Tour is once again at the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo. This is the premier air and space show in the Empire. The IAE has the biggest manufacturers, the best modders, and the greatest pilots, all gathered in one spot for enthusiasts like us to gawp at. I mean, if I had a cred for every time I've said, "Whoa, you see that?" I would be slightly more wealthy than I already am. The point is, I am excited. The best part? We're going to be here all week long. Get ready for exclusive events, exciting announcements, limited edition ship variants, and exclusive insider access with me, Jax McCleary. There's a lot more coming in the days ahead, so strap in and hold on. Trust me, you're going to want to see this.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Begin. Accessing control point. Accessing control point. Accessing control point. Control point gained. Control point gained. Accessing control point. Accessing control point. Control point gained. Control point. Control point gained. Accessing control point. Accessing control point. Control point gained. Control point gained.
The Caterpillar was one of the very earliest pledge ships we did in 2012 during the initial Kickstarter campaign. We started off with the kind of the base 5 ships that were how we imagined playing the game. We based them largely on Wing Commander and Privateer, kind of the different ship types. There was, a multi-crew ship, a fighter, a transport, explorer, that sort of thing. Midway through the campaign, we were hitting our goals, and we knew we were going to do other ships, more than just these base 5. So it's one of the Kickstarter goals in the original Kickstarter. There were these sub-goals that would unlock different ship classes. One of them was the M50 Racer, one of them was the Javelin Destroyer, and one of them was the Caterpillar. We called it a fighting transport or a pirate transport at the time.
The Caterpillar, it is an interesting ship because it's one of the first ships designed around pure modularity. So the whole front of the ship has 4 modules that in time we'll be able to replace with, from what we have now, which is cargo modules, to maybe an additional habitation module for more crew, or weapon modules that carry missiles. So we have the opportunity to really customize this ship from a player standpoint. The interior spaces as a whole. So this is the first ship where you can really do that. The Retaliator, you can do it with 2 spaces. Caterpillar, 4 spaces. So it's a lot more to players, for players to play with. It's also a pretty humongous ship. When it was first pitched, I believe it was pitched as sort of the evil twin brother of the Freelancer. But players will know that the Freelancer is a lot smaller than the Caterpillar when they see it. Actually, because of the gameplay necessities for this ship specifically, it ended up growing in size tremendously. At this point, it's longer than a Starfarer. Surface area-wise, it's not as big as a Starfarer because a Starfarer is a lot taller and a lot fatter, but it's actually longer than a Starfarer. So it's 50% longer than a Retaliator or a Constellation. It's got 2 floors, it's got 2 observation decks, 2 habitations, one in the command module, one in the main body. It's a big ship. It's a really big ship. It's the biggest ship we've done in LA.
So I inherited the Caterpillar after it had already gone through all of its early concept stages, where it was pretty set in on what it looked like, what it was for. And so my task was more about getting the interior laid out, getting the thruster placements figured out, and driving the implementation of it. I mean, the Caterpillar went through many, many iterations of determining what the inside would look like, how we would balance all of its mass, how we were going to balance its thruster placement. We also, part of the problem with the Caterpillar is that because its focus is versatility, its design page was just kept going. So we had to really pare down what features it was going to actually contain. That was part of my job, was to pick and choose, cherry pick the really good, juicy bits to focus in on for the Caterpillar. The Caterpillar can carry smaller ships. It is intended for it to be able to carry dragonflies. We have, the cargo system has elements in it that allows us to tune how well a ship can carry other ships. So as far as turning this into a carrier, there are more ships than just the Dragonfly that fit into it, but there's a lot of consequences to just letting you fill it up with hundreds of those things. It's meant to operate realistically with fewer than that.
I'm working on the 85X. It's a snub ship that you get when you buy the 890 Jump. Comes in for free. It was given to me as a 3D blockout model, concept model. I've been working on it to getting it to like a game-ready state. This is currently the first Origin ship that we are doing in the rebuild of older ships, for example. So that involves laying down the guidelines for what kind of surfacing materials. It's supposed to be like a space BMW. So in that sense, we're going for like high glossy materials, very neat, very clean, long, smooth, sweeping curves. And because we're essentially redefining what the Origin ship line is with this ship, we're essentially making everything from scratch. New materials, we're not reusing any materials, new detail sheets, all those kinds of things, different style for lights. All those things are involved in just making what makes Origin, so that when you look at an Origin ship, you can say, yep, that's an Origin ship.
So I've been working with Paul DeLessie on this ship, and I've been in charge of the cockpit and the interior. So when we were looking at this ship, we were looking towards futuristic cars, sports car interiors, trying to make it look as sleek as possible. Yes, some of our ships are more kind of battle ready. This thing here is supposed to be just as sleek as possible. Kind of getting away with metal surfaces, getting that kind of nice carbon fibers and plastics and high-tech materials in there, and making it as shiny as possible.
The Herald is a data running ship. It transports data through the cosmos, whether illicit data or legitimate data. It's also a science exploration vehicle. To prepare for this ship, we did a company profile for all the Drake line, so it's base profile on materials that are used for the ships, what their methodology is, who their target audience is, how much they're supposed to cost, stuff like that. And those all influence what, how, and how the ship's supposed to feel, look, it's put together, manufacturer type, stuff like that. All the good, nerdy little bits that make it believable is where we start. And it's like the company profile style guide that we use for the ship. So in tandem with another set of artists that we're working on another Drake ship, we both shared assets back and forth together to make sure that the ships look like they come from the same factory. Keeps the ships looking consistent. If Elwin's stealing from me and I'm stealing from Elwin, then the ships look like they're coming from the same factory, and you won't have any weird glaring differences in the ships. So out of all the ships that we've done so far, using the Drake profile would be the Herald and also the Caterpillar and the up-and-coming Cutlass. The players that are going to tend to gravitate towards this ship are people who want to explore, be the first one out, people who like to make maps in those areas, the unexplored territories. There's some financial incentive there. Science runners, they're going to be able to make money running data for people, companies, groups, their own data that they found. It's not a ship you're going to just go murder people with, so it's equipped with things to get away from being murdered. So people like, the sly, roguish type that are science inclined, I'd say would gravitate towards this ship.